Seat 30. Live this afternoon from iRacing's virtual Circuit Zolder in Zolder, Belgium. James Pike alongside Kenneth Bueno for this afternoon's action, and we go road course racing today. And Kenneth Bueno, for all the drivers who are involved in the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series, this is their week because this is the circuit that in real life traditionally hosts the championship round for those drivers, usually in the fall.
And they definitely are going to like this round a lot, round number 3. And I think that's kind of been one of the more unique parts about this series. We had Daytona, or rather we had Homestead Miami Speedway. Daytona is going to be coming up next week. But Homestead for the oval guys. We had the Most Sport Track and Canadian Tire for the Pinty Series drivers. And now we head over here to Circuit Zolder. Our first trip to Euro into this one, James. And this is going to be a lot of fun because this track is a lot shorter. This track is way different than what you experienced last week at Most Sport. So while you had a lot of flowing corners, a lot of momentum carried through in Canadian Tire, that's going to be all killed by the chicanes, the tight corners, and the tight confines of this Belgian track.
You make a very good point there that this is a very stylistically different circuit from Canadian Tire Motorsport Park outside of maybe the opening set of corners. Lots of chicanes here, lots of heavy braking zones, but at the same time, also lots of opportunities to make passes on corner entry in particular. If you can get alongside somebody, you can outbrake them going into some of these corners and get around them. It'd be a lot of fun to see how it all pans out. KB, we'll take a look at the schedule here momentarily and get a good look at where we are. But for now, track analysis. Tell us what we're up to today, KB.
Well, this is a very interesting track in Circuit Zolder, located, of course, in Zolder in Belgium. It's our first trip in this series to the European countries at this point of the season. It's a 2.492 mile, 4.0 kilometer track that opened all the way back in 1963. James, this track has history dating back to the 1970s, 1980s in Formula One racing for the Belgian Grand Prix. And of course, like you mentioned earlier at the top of the show, this is a staple track in the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series schedule that they run every single year in the fall. Also hosts a 24-hour race earlier or around the year. And of course, there are so many events that are held at this very track. Again, like you mentioned, this is something that the Wheel and Euro Series drivers are going to like a lot because they're very familiar with this track. 10 turns, lots of chicanes, lots of tight corners, and of course, a lot of hard braking areas on this track.
If you want dates for your calendar, it's October 8th and 9th. Later on this year. Here's a look at your race analysis for today's event. We go for 30 laps, 74 miles, just around 120 kilometers. Pit road speed, 35 miles an hour. Your pit window, anywhere from 15 to 17 laps. So we've heard that may actually be a little bit long, that the 14 to 16 that you see on your screen actually is going to be what you expect. And weather, balmy 78 degrees Fahrenheit, winds to the north at 2 miles an hour. A friendly reminder that you can head to d-box.com/eNASCAR/contest. And if you can predict who will win the eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by D-Box, you could potentially walk away with the rig that you see on your screen. So many bits and pieces that come with it: a SimLabs P1X chassis, racing seat brackets, a full Fanatec direct drive wheel set with a shifter, a mount, curved Samsung 49-inch screen, and a haptic system courtesy of D-Box, who invites you to feel it all. Our starting grid for this afternoon's Place Seat 30 looks as follows. Tobias Saudhauer out of Germany, your top time with a 1 minute 36.378 second lap to take the pole at Circuit Zolder ahead of Simon Pilot, the Belgian on home turf. Alain Day was victorious last week in Canada. He'll start alongside Ulysses Delceau, Paul Jouffreau, and Victor Barradas Jr., top driver in the point standings, coming around to start 6th.
Wheel and Euro Series driver Frédéric Gabillon will start on the inside of row 4. Homestead winner and Drive for Diversity driver Raja Carruth will be on his outside, followed by Jake Gosio and Davide Dallara in the 90 machine, rounding out your top 10. Diego Ortiz for the Peak Mexico Series will line up inside row 6, and Train Lapsvich in his Pinty Series car will be back behind him on the outside of that row.
Andres Perez de Lara and Gordon Barnes starting alongside each other, 13th and 14th. Miguel Gomez and Giorgio Maggi starting 15th and 16th. 17th on the grid is Vladimir Ziortsis, and Massimiliano Lanza will roll off from 18th.
Bit of work for Alex Tagliani to do. He'll start in P19 here from Circuit Zolder. Jaden Reyna making his very first start in this eNASCAR International iRacing Series. He'll line up the inside of the top 20. Aaron Cosio, Justin Campbell will be the drivers back through P22, and then all the way through P24. Row number 12, a new driver in this series as well, Abraham Calderon in the number 2 car, and Yevgen Sokolovsky in that 12th row.
Alex de Alba, Alberto Parabianco, and Jocelyn Fecto completing our 27-car field for this afternoon's Place 30. Race number 3 of the 2022 D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports. Before we go green flag racing, let's head down to the pit road for the first time and go to Windsor, Ontario's Justin Prince. Justin.
Thank you very much, James. And you alluded to the potential of that window shifting around for the pit stops today. Was speaking with Traded Laps a bit before today's action, especially after seeing some of the drivers stretch to a no-stop last round. He mentioned this round, drivers may be up to 2 gallons short of making it on that no-stop call, meaning there's a chance some drivers, if they were to think about that, James, would have to really try and fuel save it back and on down. There is the likely chance we see a pit stop in that regard as a result today. As well, Roger Caruth was somebody that had a lot of frustrations in practice, just 2 clean laps the entire session. He actually celebrated on his personal stream when he completed that second lap around the racetrack. He's mentioned his goal essentially for today, try and outscore his fellow competitors, especially when it comes to this series championship. That's the main focal point for the number 13.
The points racing perhaps from Raja Caruth, originally from Washington, D.C., part of NASCAR's Drive for Diversity program. He will roll off from this afternoon in the 8th position, just behind Victor Morales, the man chasing with points. Actually, a little correction from earlier. 2 points back is Morales from Caruth entering this afternoon's event. Morales, however, will start 2 places ahead of Caruth on the grid. He'll roll off from 6th, highest qualifying driver out of the Peak Mexico Series, NASCAR's primary series down south of the border of the United States. But it is Downhauer, Pilot Day, Del Sol, Jufro, a lot of NASCAR Wheeling Euro Series representation at the front of the field, and rightly so. Kenneth Bueno, no shocker that this track, which not only has been part of the Euro Series calendar for some time, but also one of the longest tenured tracks in the Euro Series calendar, has a lot of Euro Series drivers up at the front.
This is their hometown. This is their place. This is where they can make their magic happen. There's going to be the final chicane. We're ready for the green flag here from Zolder.
We are off and away from Circuit Zolder here in the Place 30. Race number 3 for the D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports is underway. So Downhauer leading the home countryman Simon Pilot, who, you figure a lot of these NASCAR Rolling Euro Series drivers have plenty of incentive to run well today, but I think Pilot, more than anyone else, might have incentive to try and win this, being the lone Belgian in this race. Here's last week's winner, Alain Day, out of Israel, trying to climb up the point standings. Enters this afternoon 8th in the standings, just about 14 points back of your points leader, Raja Karutha, currently running third, right behind Pilot, a little bit further back. This is Raja Karutha in the 13. He's just ahead of, I believe that's Jake Cosio, and just behind Frederic Gabillon in the 7th position as they run their way down towards the first chicane here on the backside of the circuit. And Kenneth, you talked about it in pre-race. Once you clear the opening set of corners here at Circuit Zolder, it's a lot of chicanes for the rest of the lap.
And a lot of bumps, a lot of curbs too. And luckily for these NASCAR Xfinity Series cars, they have the opportunity to kind of abuse those curbs a little more just because these cars are heavier. Suspension can kind of handle that, let's say, opposed to an F3 car, another open wheel type of racer. You can kind of abuse it here, but there are a lot of chicanes at this track. And you mentioned a lot of opportunities to make passes. It can get very tough when you're entering those chicanes because they're very tight, very small, so you make sort of the most minimalist mistake in either of those corners and you can go off, you can slam a curb and your car will go sailing up into the air off on the track. So everybody's trying to make sure, at least in the opening stint of this race, James, that they can handle those correctly, especially after practice and qualifying in this race setting, and be able to make sure they can just keep their cars clean for the most part. Here's Davide Dallara in the 90. Hasn't had the best start to this eNASCAR International iRacing Series up to this point, but so far a great qualifying effort for the number 90. He's now up to P11 so far, just tailing behind the 6 car of Diego Ortiz as they come back to the start-finish line and back to a very interesting left-hander in turn 1.
Yeah, lots of corners to talk about, lots of corners to introduce you to. We'll try and take you through a lap here at Circuit Zolder and tell you what's what, where's where, and what corners we'll be referring to over the course of our broadcast. You see these cars now currently coming off of the Lucien Brunchbocht and down into the Kleine Chicane. Pretty easy one there. Lots of German and Dutch influence in these quarter names. We're a bit of a melting pot location. Belgium, Poles, both German and Dutch influence. So lots of these corners going to carry that sort of name. But heading through turn 6 and then the Gilles Villeneuve chicane. This is turn 7 officially before we hit the Tortemenbocht, which is this right-hander, slightly sweeping, not quite as fast as the opening stint of corners, but they come up the hill, just crest it a little bit and work their way towards, and here's a tongue twister, I don't blame you if anybody would miss it, the Bolderberg Gehaspelbocht. Say that 10 times fast. Before this slight little kink is the Jochen-Rindt, that's turn 10 on the corner. And then the final chicane, the Jackie Itzbuck, named after one of the greatest drivers in Formula One history. This chicane right before you hit the start-finish line as Alonde tries to chase down Simon Pilot, then back to the start and finish line, and then off towards turn 1. 2, 3, and 4. That's that wide sweeping section that you'll see your leaders now head through now. This is the Oosterlinks, and you've got the Sternwalkbocht, the Kanalbocht, and the Lucien Brunchbocht. 2, 3, and 4. Here's Sternwalkbocht, turn number 2, Kanalbocht, turn 3 when they complete this, and then Lucien Brunchbocht, turn number 4 on the far end of the short chute here, right past the end of the sand trap before they go storming down one of the straights here to the Kleine Chicane, turn 5, and that completes the lap that we've been running on board with last week's winner along the day. So, lots of names. Are you ready to brush up on your German and your Dutch, Kenneth?
I'm not sure. I never took any classes for German, so I think I'm just bracing for impact at this point. Just ready to name all of this. But I mean, we're watching Alain Day, and what I noticed there from the onboard cam is now you look at Jojo Maggi in the number 69 machine as he works behind one of the drivers on track into one of the chicanes here from Zolder. What I noticed is that he's very physical on the wheel. We kind of had that as a point, James, last week at Mosport and Canadian Tire, where you pretty much had a lot of physicality needed to go around that track with a lot of pace and with a lot of consistency because you had a lot of elevation changes. The track was very rough. You had a lot of bumpy surfaces, which kind of threw the car around. And I'm noticing the same kind of jarring actions with the steering wheel like you're seeing Omanji and Day right now. But the main difference is that there's no bumps on this track. This track is relatively smooth. You're not going to hear the car get slammed onto the sort of the underbody of the race car because of the bumps. What's really interesting about this track and how these drivers have been sawing the wheel is finding grip. With this track temperature being in triple digits right now to start this race, it means that drivers are fighting for rear-wheel grip in these low downforce Xfinity Series cars, and especially given the fact that this track is relatively flat in most parts of the corners at least. you're pretty much fighting for grip at every stage, on braking, on entry, on apex, and on exit. So there is still a physicality involved, just a different type. And from Alan Day and Giorgio Maggi, definitely an interesting way to sort of look at the lap here from Zolder, as Day currently still works behind Simon Pilot, has not let him go, to say the least, and still drawing the wheel out of the corner.
Yeah, Pilot has not been able to shake Day, but Douwenhauer has been able to shake both Pilot and Day out in front of this. He's already clear by 1.5 seconds, and we're only now working lap number 5. So Douwenhauer with plenty of space to breathe by comparison as Day and Pilot fight over the final 2 podium spots, and then Paul Jouffreau and Ulisses Delso, the 2 keeping track here as you get a good onboard look from Douwenhauer. All clear racetrack ahead of him. That's exactly what you want to see at this stage if you are the German.
And Douwenhauer had a show out last week at Canadian Tire. Remember, we saw him run in the podium pretty much all day long, was behind a very dominant Alan Day, but that didn't mean that Douwenhauer did not have any sort of pace. Remember, he was working off third on back and pretty much holding them away and making sure he could kind of separate himself from everybody else. So right now, Douwenhauer just making sure that he can stay up front, he can be the most dominant car outright today, and maybe be able to be the 3rd different winner in this eNASCAR International iRacing Series season. There's a look at the 51 Jake Cosio, the Javelin machine, the Ford Mustang right now, as he comes out of one of the corners. And at this moment, the driver of the 51 is currently, I think, a little bit further back through the field at this point in time, but everybody pretty much just making sure they can find their rhythms, and some drivers trying to make some passes, like Train Lapsevich right now. He's kind of working on a driver of his own at this point in the race, and you see a couple of drivers just right in front of him as he could be making the move. That is Davide Delara in the number 90. This is a battle for what is, I believe, P11 at the moment, and they're trying to tail behind the fellow car of Diego Ortiz in the number 6 car as they single file out, and it looks like Delara will be able to defend the spot so far.
Just to start setting these breakaway groups, this trio is one of them: Ortiz, Delara, and Lapsevich, 10th, 11th, and 12th. You've got the leaders clear to about, call it maybe 4th or 5th, and then a gap between Ulisses Delso and Victor Baradas in 6th of about 5 seconds. That carries you all the way back to Raja Caruth, and then from Caruth in 9th, a gap of about 1.6 seconds to Diego Ortiz, Delara, and Lapsevich. That's how the top 12 spread out. Here's a good look at Jouffreau, who is now trying to chase after Simon Pilot after Alonde made the pass to go to P2.
Yeah, Paul Jouffreau, we saw him with a great qualifying effort. Started pretty much just within the top 5 today. Has already made up 1 spot, already up to P4, and he's got a good amount of speed. I remember, I think Canadian Tire, we mentioned how much speed he had at that racetrack. I mean, we know that that was a Pinty Series stable venue, but now that everybody's in the Whelen Euro Series side of things in this series, Jouffreau definitely doing a good job of keeping his pace, and maybe over the long run could be up there as well. Saw a car go all the way off track as you look at Jake Cosio in his machine, and I believe it may have been one of the lap cars near the rear. And at this point, Cosio is trying to work on Frédéric Gabillon in the number 3, and they're trying to chase after what is 2nd place in points and could be the points leader after today if he holds this through. James Pike, the number 39 of Victor Barales, who we've seen be so good over the first 2 races, and it's still showing out in the top 6 so far today.
It's incredibly difficult. You can hear it on some of the onboards, especially in the opening 4 corners here at Circuit Zolder. It is so tough to put the power down, like you said, Kenneth Bueno, because there's just not a lot of banking, not a lot of grip, not a lot of, tire to drive your car off of when you get to corner exit. You really have to feather the throttle to make this work. But something that Victor Baradas seems like he's not having too much of a problem with. Pretty focused for sure, but again, at the Formula Rim, we pointed that out. He's run with that every week, but that really should play into his hands on the road courses where you have to go back and forth, left and right. Don't necessarily have to worry about the oval wheel and the rim potentially getting in your way. That's why more often than not, you see a lot of road racers with the shorter sort of handlebar wheel that you see Baradas and company working. He's not the only one in this series I've noticed that's done something like that, but plenty of speed for him. It's working out nicely for Baradas, who currently rides at 6th.
And Baradas has been definitely consistent as the driver behind him just got a little bit off course. I believe that was Gabione in the number 3, led Jake Cosio by at that point and really went off at that section of the track. And at this point, everyone's really fighting for grip. That's really the main concern. I don't think many of it's really track position. A lot of it is just either developing rhythm or finding as much grip as possible. And in the middle of the corners, it is so hard to put the throttle in. And Gabione just a little bit went off. The cycle fell off of the racing line, and that allowed the 51 of Cosio to go by. Now Cosio looks like he's up in P7. That's going to allow here the 13 of Caruth, despite some front-end damage on the opening lap, James, to catch up and slowly, maybe, but surely be able to catch up to around P8 on back end, and maybe at this point snatch into the top 5 if he can do so. There's a look at the 13 Chevrolet Camaro, the Washington, D.C. native, and right about there, you can kind of see a little bit of a bump there on the front end of the car. That is not natural. He got it on the opening lap, a bit of a touch there to the 3 car of Gabione at the start of the race, and so not sure if there is any sort of significant impact aerodynamically or in engine performance for Caruth. He seems to be okay as he rides 9th.
Caruth, I know we've chatted with him, and in general over the past few years, he got his start on the sim primarily by running oval races and hadn't necessarily come into the last years with a lot of road course experience. And I mentioned to us that this series was going to be a good opportunity for him to test himself against drivers who regularly run road courses. It's a discipline that he would like to be better at, a discipline that he'd like to be faster in, and this certainly will stand as a good challenge. He might not be the fastest driver on the road course, but if he can hang tough here and at the Daytona International Speedway road course next week, then he may well set himself up to where he can run in Phoenix and not have too much ground to make up or hold off from to potentially win this D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series. Let's get Justin Prince in for more information from Pit Road. Justin.
Thank you very much, James. As the battle for the race lead happens here, keep in mind some of the drivers over the radio have reported struggles with those tire lockups from the get-go. Lots of apologies over the radio, in fact, over drivers locking up and getting into one another. But the main focus is the give and take has been a discussion point, such as right there, to be able to get that move right there done. Keep in mind, when it came to Caruth letting some cars go earlier on in this run, James, one of the main things he mentioned was he thought he should have let a driver go earlier, but didn't want to lose time. In turn, that was eventually the number 51 passing on by into one of the quick chicanes. So that's one of the main thought processes for the drivers right now as we approach a third of the way through.
As Alonde has gone to the race lead in this place seat, 30 we're now on board with Simon Pilot once again, who this time is trying to chase down Tobias Dauenhauer as Day has run from that third spot on the starting grid to the lead, and he is beginning to really put it on these drivers. Last time by, he was a full second quicker than anyone else in this field, just over 1 minute 39 seconds. We'll take a look as they come across the start-finish line and get a feel for times as we now approach lap 10 of 30. But again, last time by, Day with a 148 to Dauenhauer's 142.2. Pilot, interestingly enough, was faster than Day at a 143, but you also have to take into account the fact that Day had to make the pass. But Alonde really flexing his muscle, and the Israeli driver beginning to make a statement. This isn't just a one-week thing for him, Kenneth. He should have speed, I would think, here and at Daytona as well next week.
Yeah, I think if he's going to keep this momentum up and at least continue to go for race wins, Daytona is going to be rather a cakewalk if he can get this second win today from Zolder. But I also noticed you mentioned that Pilot was faster than Alonde the last time by. So was Paul Duffreau in 64. Don't count out the Frenchman. He's now starting to come in to the top four as we watch Justin Campbell in the 81 car. He's going to hit pit road here this time by. This is going to be very interesting on the fuel strategy. But in the case of the guys of Duffreau, in the case of Pilot, all of the guys have been around the top four. They're now really starting to hound on Tobias Dauenhauer in his 50 car. So I think Dauenhauer may have to worry a little more about covering off the A in the 64. And I figured, James, he may have burnt his stuff up, maybe have burnt the rear tires a little bit too much in that opening stint, trying to pull away from Day and the rest of the field. And so he's really struggling with the grip of his Ford Mustang, and then some, allowing Pilot, Duffreau, maybe even Del So within the top five to catch up as Day begins to pull away that run.
That was some sideways driving there from Tobias Dallenhauer coming out of the corner. He was practically fishtailing it down the straight for a split second until he gathered the rear end from underneath him. But it's going to open up the opportunity not only for Pilot to potentially get alongside him, but also along Day. As we remind you that today's broadcast of the eNASCAR International iRacing Series is brought to you by our friends at D-Box Technologies, who invite you to feel it all. You can learn more by visiting their website at www.d-box.com today. A third of the way home in this place seat 30 race number 3 on the 5-race schedule of the 2022 D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports. Here's one of the newcomers to the series for this week, Jaden Reyna, part of the Drive for Diversity program that NASCAR runs for 2022, a driver who's got a lot of grassroots racing experience at Charlotte Motor Speedway in the United States, has come up through their programs and now racing virtual Xfinity Series stock cars in this series for the first time with a nice pass around Andres Perez de Lara to move up to 14th, Kenneth.
Yeah, Reyna, even despite some of the heavy front-end damage he has on his Chevrolet Camaro in sim, that car is still chugging along and now up into P14. Definitely a good start for the debut race out of the driver from North Carolina. I think him and Carruth can take a lot of similarities. Both of them grew up racing around the legend car, the short track scene. They're more oval races than anything else, and they're taking their part against some of the best road races in the world and actually doing really well against him as they're side-by-side. Reyna and Andres Perez de Lara so far into the chicane. It's going to get very close as you watch Simon Pilot still trying to catch up to Tobias Dallenhauer and still waiting on that move, still waiting on the opportunity. And then you have drivers further back to the field who slowly made progress that we haven't talked about all day long, James. Alex Tagliani, the Canadian driver, there's a look on the left side of your screen of his very intricate sim rig as he goes into one of the chicanes here at this track. Tagliani started from the pit lane today, James. He's already up to P21, so a very good opening stint for Tagliani. Not sure how he's going to be able to catch up to the rest of the field and bring them all together, but still, progress is progress. That's all he's looking for right now.
Paul Jouffreau here, who's got victories in this series last year, trying to chase down Pilot and chase down Dallenhauer for second. He's just sort of been sitting there, but it'll be a lot of fun to keep our eyes on Jouffreau, one of the NASCAR Whelen Euro Series drivers, as I could not tell who that was. Stopped in the middle of the ground chicane. That was actually Jocelyn Fecteau that they just drove past, but somehow they managed to miss him, and everybody carries on it, at least for the moment. But a scary, scary moment for some of your race leaders.
Yeah, everybody's starting to really suffer the consequences of old tires and the brakes starting to fade just a little bit on these NASCAR Xfinity Series cars. Of course, we've heard from the field, especially at this point of the race, that wheel hop is becoming a very big concern. James, you mentioned the wheel lockups at these heavy braking zones at Zolder. It is really starting to take into effect. And you kind of compare it from last week at Canadian Tire, you really didn't have many of those hard braking sections of the track. Yes, you did have to hop on the brakes, you did have to slow the car down, but it wasn't to this extent. You didn't have to slow down for a very tight chicane or a very tight right-hander or a very tight left-hander. You were mostly kind of hopping on the brakes, flowing on the gas, making sure your car can just kind of flow through it like a dance, like your ballerina dancing, going around that track. This one, though, you kind of have to stop, shimmy, shuffle, get all over the place to make sure that your car is in the right place at the right moment. And then also factoring in that you've got wheel spin, your throttle wants to kick out, your car wants to step out of line, and you got to make sure and keep it in check that you don't do that. Pilot almost about got turned there as his car went sideways, almost had a tap from the 64 of Paul Jouffreau, but that shows you right there, James, just how tough it is to drive these cars at this stage of the event.
How intriguing this is, and this is a similar issue that we saw with Simon Pilot last week at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Remember, he and Jouffreau were two of the drivers that came down and pitted in the middle of the race for fresh tires. They lost the track position and never were quite able to gain it back, as here goes Jouffreau looking to make a move to try and get a foothold on the inside as they climb through the racetrack and make their way towards turn 7, the Gilles-Villeneuve chicane. Leave it to the Frenchman Jouffreau to make the pass on Pilot, go to third, and try and go chase after Dallenhauer for the runner-up spot.
And what a pass that was, James, by Jouffreau. Was sideways in the middle of the chicane, You don't usually think about making passes at that part of the track just because it's so narrow, but Jufro sent it. Jufro had the bravery, and now Jufro gets the reward of the high risk. He's now steps into the podium for the very first time today. Take a look at this replay. Going into the corner, right-hander. This is almost contact between the two, by the way. And at this point, Pilot's looking in his rearview mirror. He knows Jufro is there, but just waiting at the moment for Jufro to make this pass. Jufro plays it very smart, goes hard on the brakes here, makes sure he can wait for this chicane, but then waits for the next opportunity. Sees there, Pilot makes a mistake, puts the pressure, right back on the gas, right there to the outside he'll go, finds the space, forces his nose in there, and then going into this part of the track, James, this is absolute bravery right there. Inside, sideways off of the little bump there, and a perfect textbook pass. A little rough, but it looked good from Jufro, and he makes the pass complete.
On board it with Ulysses Del Show, just there now, working around 3 and 4, and a pass there from Jake Cosio, who has continued to climb up the leaderboard. He may have beaten the hardest charger of the race so far, currently in the 6th position now after starting 9th. So very nice run for the driver out of the Pink Mexico City.
Great run so far for him, but here's a look at Elisa Del Sol at this point of the race, who's just behind Cosio and actually fell out of the top 5 in recent memory here because Victor Barrales in the 39, he made a pass there, and then Cosio, who was just kind of hanging in with that 39 car, decided to also keep up the speed and was able to get by Del Sol at that point in this race. So a good touch there by both Barrales and Cosio, both of them, of course, trying to catch up to Simon Pilot as we look at Diego Ortiz right now working on what I believe is the car of Davide Dallara in the 90.
On board here with Diego Ortiz, who currently is looking for that final spot in the top 10, chasing down Davide Dallara. So Italy versus Mexico going at it for the final place in the top 10 and the spot right behind Raja Carutha. And this could become a 3-car battle at a moment, because as these two have been fighting just ahead, you see the blue car there of Alex de Alba, who's just now entering the frame and beginning to reel these drivers in as they've lost time fighting one another. So it could be a trio that we're working with for this final spot in the top 10 after too long, but pit stops beginning as Pilot is in, Ortiz is not in, De Alba is in, as is Dallara. We're going to see people come down pit road, and if we've got pit stops, we've got Justin Prince ready to cover them.
Yes, indeed, it's time for some pit stops as the majority of the field coming in this time by the 8, the 3, the 13, leading that respective grouping. When it comes to Raja Caru, fairly quiet on the radio for the most part, outside of trying to figure out when would be the best time to pit. Seems like he has decided around this halfway point. Since the time he had to let on by one of the drivers, he has been mainly focused on trying to hit his marks around the racetrack and trying to avoid off tracks. One of the drivers who is fairly exhausted coming into this one is Trayden Lapsevich, because as many people know across the iRacing service, it's special event time, which involves a lot of longer stints on the racetrack, let's put it that way, on a road course. Trayden Lapsevich went straight from one of those respective stints straight into this event today. He's now coming back onto the racetrack, a very quiet run, got to as high as 11th before the pit stops. As well, keep in mind, he mentioned drivers having to deal with wheel hop. Again, essentially, for those who do not know, it's essentially the product of unmatching engine revs in the downshifts. Essentially, when you're going into those braking zones, you end up having that chance of the wheel hop, which can send you on forward. Most of these drivers have been dealing with that for the past while. Some of them, especially in the mid-pack, have been dealing with a lot of slipping and sliding and trying to focus on the marks. A lot of apologies over the past 5 laps, in fact, for some of the competitors. More pit stops as well coming underway. Alonde stays on the racetrack, but the 50, the 64, amongst those coming in, as well as the rest of the race leaders, they've been fairly solid on the racetrack. Keep in mind, though, as we've seen, that grouping of cars was getting very squirrely on the circuit, James. Expect rear grip to be a major thought process for the second half of the race, especially those wanting to conserve those tires to make sure they don't slip and slide around, as we've seen in the final 5 laps.
Thank you, Justin. A few drivers yet to come down pit road, most notably Alonde and Diego Ortiz from first and second. But yes, wheel hop, an issue that we see often, especially with road courses that have heavy braking zones. It's a phenomenon that occurs primarily when you downshift like Justin said, and the change in RPMs going from, say 6,000 to 9,000, if your RPMs are higher, the wheel will spin more, but if that doesn't necessarily line up with where you're shifting for a split second, your tires will lose traction and then regain it as the axles adjust to the correct RPMs. And it's that little slight difference that can send you a little bit further in your braking zone than you want to go. Something these drivers have to be mindful of for the duration of this Place E30 as a long day. Your race leader now comes down pit road, and we'll wait to see if Diego Ortiz does the same. However, we'll have to wait almost 30 seconds here for that to happen. That is the gap that Day has opened up on the current runner-up, who Kenneth Bueno has yet to come down pit road.
And so far, I think it's really interesting to describe how much Day has been really performing today from Circuit Zolder. Diego Ortiz now, at this point, we're still watching him. At this point, there he goes, straight into the pit lane, and I was watching a bit of the driver's entrances. It's a very interesting area to go into the pit road speed limit. Right there at that line where the yellow cones are, Diego Ortiz now into pit road speed limit. He's going to go on this little tiny chicane before he gets officially into his pit stall, which should be the first and only stop of the day for him and the rest of the field. But it's a chase down there into that little chicane where you have to go hard on the brakes and make sure you can carry as much speed before you go down on the speed limit and go, of course, to pit road speed. I saw Jufro and Downhauer practically racing all the way up until that white line and the yellow cones. It was fascinating to see between the two as it finally looks like Ortiz is going to come down pit road, and that should cycle everybody back out. James, it's no real change within the top five. It's going to be Dave, Pilot, Downhauer, Jufro, and Barrales. Pretty much no difference from when we started to where we ended.
Most of your leaders that come down pit road gives us the opportunity to take a quick commercial break, so we'll step aside for a moment, but don't go anywhere. More coverage of the Place E30 race number 3 in the 2022 D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series coming your way in just a few moments.
When I hit the wall, this thing shook like crazy. I have experienced that in real life, so I can compare.
I tend to choose rally games that are really putting the actuators through their paces, and they've been holding up really well.
That's exactly how it is in real life. That's the coolest part.
Welcome back to iRacing's coverage of the Place E30 race number 3. 5 in the 2022 D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports. That's Miguel Gomez that you saw go around on our static shots, but more importantly, issue for your points leader Raja Karut that happened during the break. We'll get a look at that after we get a look at this. There's the contact with Gomez, and that was Vladimir Ziotsis, the Cypriot driver. We got into over in turns 2 and 3. Meanwhile, we'll see if we can slide back a little bit further and get a sense of what happened to Raja Karut here, because he was fine, and then got a little bit of company from the inside and had to go off the racetrack and lost some track position. Fell back into the 9th, or rather 12th position after running 9th at the flat.
And Carruth was trying to get himself back into the fight. Remember, we saw him come down pit road along with everybody else in the field. I think spent a little extra time, James, to fix some of the nose damage he had from lap 1 with contact from the 3 of Gavillon, but he was in a hornet's nest, to say the least. There's Miguel Gomez in the green and yellow Camaro, Elisa Del Sol. Look how loose Carruth gets. Going into the corner, that's Vladimir Zotzis in the the one car. He tries diving it in. Of course, he's got the advantage. He's faster, but then right there, but just overdrives the corner, heads straight for the gravel, into the grass. Luckily, no damage, no hittage of the wall for Raja Karuth, but definitely a little scary moment there, trying to work through some traffic. Right now, Karuth is 9th and still catching up right now to the 14 of Alex de Alba. So no doubt Karuth has speed. It's just when you try to cycle back on green flag pit stops, it gets a little bit tough when you have so many cars around you like that on a very narrow track, to say the least.
The problem here, though, for Karuth is that he is going to be watching Baradas very closely because Baradas is up into 4th, and as it stands, Baradas would take over the points lead going into the road course at Daytona next week. So we could have a change atop the standings on our way out of Belgium if results hold. But again, we still have over 10 laps left in this place seat 30, so plenty of time for drivers to make moves, including Jake Cosio, who we're on board now and trying to chase after the aforementioned Victor Baradas. 2 drivers from the NASCAR Pit Mexico Series chasing after one another. And if Cosio could get around Baradas, that certainly would be to Karuth's benefit.
It definitely would. Every point, every position is a point here in this series. But, I mean, you can't doubt just how quick Barrales has been over the course of this season. I think, apart from, I'd say, Karuth, this driver right here in the 39 has been the most dynamic from all 3 tracks that we've visited in this eNASCAR International iRacing Series. Didn't probably expect him to do the best at Homestead of Miami Speedway, but he proved us wrong. Showed up in the top 3, battled with the leaders in Lapsevich and Karuth in the final laps, and was able to knock down a podium spot before the day was said and done, then head to Canadian Tire. Ended up kind of backing up his effort at Homestead of Miami Speedway, getting another podium, and right now, if he can get by Paul Jouffreau, he's going to be on track to grab his 3rd straight in this series in all 3 races up to this point. So that 39 has definitely been quick, and with the way Raja has had to tackle these road course races, which necessarily aren't his strong suit on the sim, apart from the ovals that we usually see him compete on, it's been more of a challenge for that 13 to kind of overcome the barrier and, of course, try to beat a driver like Barrales, who's definitely more natural on the road courses because he races there in real life as you run on board with Karuth, and still catching up to Alex de Alba. Not significant gains out of the 13, but he needs to kind of make this work a little bit faster than he is at the moment because, of course, if Barrales stays there in P4 or gains, that's only more points that falls off of Karuth and adds to Barrales' tally.
The good news for Karuth is that as I look at timing and scoring, there's about a 12-second gap between Jouffreau and Baradas. So it will take a pretty significant mistake from one of Pilot, one of Jouffreau, maybe even a long day, who's about 8 seconds ahead of Jouffreau in the race lead, in order for somebody to slip back into Baradas' hands and allow him to gain that 3rd position. So he'll have a lot to do to try and go from 4th to 3rd, but also might have a lot to do to hold on to 5th. Because Jake Cosio, I don't know if we've talked about his race enough as we get a good look here at Trayton Lapsevich out of the NASCAR 50 Series. And I think Trayton's having some fun with this now because he's just sort of sliding around the racetrack and doing whatever he wants to and having some fun showing off his car control. But to the Cosio point that I was making, we really do need to point out just how strong this run has been from Jake Cosio. He's come from 9th to 5th. He's been in the top 10 just about the entirety of this race and had so much speed. But another driver, can I point out, that we'd be very remiss not to hit on because he is our hard charger of the day so far. How about that blue car of Alex de Alba riding in the 8th spot, also out of the NASCAR Pit Mexico Series, started in 25th on the grid out of 27 cars, all the way up to P8. It begs the question, what could he have done if he actually had track position? But Alex de Alba has been storming through this field at Zolder.
He definitely has, and there's no question that it's taken a lot of work from this track because it's so narrow. You've got so much grass, you've got so many walls around you that any small mistake will send you off, will lose you a lot of time, and can really take you out of contention. But to go this far from 25th, which is pretty much almost dead last here in this race, all the way up to the top 10, even with the troubles of pit road cycles and all the things that had to go with that, it's been a monumental effort out of that 14. And remember, we've seen some bright spots out of him, but we haven't seen him do kind of perform in the spotlight. I think today is definitely a spotlight effort out of the 14, and this should be noted, definitely, James, going into the final 2 rounds at Daytona Road Course and at the Phoenix Raceway. He continues to put it on as he tries to catch up to the car in front of him, which is the 10 of Luisa Del Sol, which you're riding on board with right now, and it looks like Alex Alba is well on track to catching the driver of the 10. So I think sooner than later, James, you may see a battle for that P7 spot in just a handful of moments.
Mexico versus France potentially on our hands, because De Alba indeed has been right there on lap times. Last time by Del Sol was actually just a hair quicker, but they're only separated by about 5 seconds. So one of those cases where you cannot afford to make a mistake, because the moment you do, the driver's going to be right on your rear bumper. You're going to have to really fight for this one. As we get a good look at Del Sol and Frederic Gabillon, who is only a half second ahead of Del Sol. And this could very well become a battle for the 6th position within the next few moments.
And I like the sort of concept of these smaller battles that we see throughout the field, because usually in oval racing you kind of see it happen, but when the field separates, they usually separate, and that's kind of just how it is. But you see a lot of comers and goers as the 69 of Maggi almost got really out of shape there. That was just behind the 18 of Alex Tagliani there in his car. And that was almost unfortunate for Giorgio Maggi, as Massimiliano Lanza was able to go by. Take a look at this. And we mentioned wheel hop, we mentioned the lack of grip here at this track. Maggi definitely experienced that. He was trying to push it behind the Viagra Camaro, and then going right into this right-hander, hard on the brakes. Feels like he's gonna hit the 18 car, but what a magnificent save to keep that car going. Look at that drift in the middle of the corner. Fantastic job by Maggi to save that car. Only sacrifice, loss of track position to the 88.
He definitely didn't expect Tagliani to stop as quickly as he did, but I also think, given how far off he was going, that he may have overshot the corner the same way that Tagliani did in front of him. So that might be good cause as to why both those drivers might have been on the brakes a little bit too hard in that very tricky turn 2, 3, 4 complex with all sorts of long, flowy corners. But it's the only place on this racetrack where you got flowy corners that Ersteling, Sternwalk-Bocht, Kanalbocht, and Lucien Bianchi-Bocht complex that these drivers are just now exiting on your screen, heading off into turn 5 in the Canada chicane.
Continue to watch this battle here between Del Sol and Gabillon, and there's sort of a magic to road course racing battles, and it comes down to kind of pressuring the guy in front of you, making sure you can either maximize braking, maximize apex, trying to go for a slow in, fast out approach. And that really comes into the factor when you're thinking about a car in front of you, because obviously they have different motives, they have different braking methods, they have different ways of and styles of going around each and every road course. And so when you stay behind them, you let them know, hey, I'm here. And if you make a mistake, I'm here to take it. I'm here to go for all of the prizes. I'm going here for all the track position I can get. So Del Sol definitely still putting it on the 3. And I think this is the closest we've seen them all day long, James Spike. At this point, Del Sol is right on the rear bumper of the 3. It's only going to take a couple of moments for Del Sol to finally make this pass. Here he goes inside into the chicane. These are the final corners. Not going to be able to poke the nose in through. Del Sol will wait another time.
Trying to make it happen at the Jackie X Book, and we'll see whether or not the Erstelings provide some sort of opportunity. We've seen a lot of drivers make moves at the Sternwalk Book and the Canal Book, turns 2 and 3, as we go on board with Gabillon and look back towards Del Sol. Clean line through the Erstelings, now through Sternwalk Book. Canal Book coming up here. Once they cleared this, here comes Del Sol. Good run out of corner number 2, and it's through Canal Book that Del Sol will make the move as Gabillon goes wide and move Ulysses Del Sol up into P6 now to try and chase after Jake Cosio.
Exactly what I mentioned, James. Putting the pressure, wait for the mistake, wait for the push, and then bam, send it in the corner. That's exactly what Del Sol did. Waited for the opportunity to see if the 3 was going to go wide. He did. Found the inside move, and now Del Sol is up to P6 in this race. Here's a battle right now between Ortiz and Raja Caruth. Remember, Raja at one point in this race, after the green flag pit stop cycle, he was catching up to Alex Alba in the 14. But Alex Alba, the hardest charger that we mentioned a little bit earlier, he's now starting to pull away, and so Diego Ortiz is now next on the block to try and get that spot on Raja Caruth. It is safe to say that Diego Ortiz does have fresher tires, as he's going to slam into the 13. Going into the chicane, they're both going to be able to save it. Both of them able to stay on track. But that is a very tough place to dig your nose in and make a pass. Ortiz had to suffer a bit of the consequences. Caruth had to bully his way out of it, make sure he can defend as most as possible, and Caruth will stay in 9th.
He was almost alongside Raja. That was very close to being almost Ortiz's corner. Not quite. Definitely a racing incident there, but I think the point has been well made that Raja Carruth knows that Ortiz is there, but Ortiz, we missed it on cams, but he just about slid through the grass and lost control of it. Now you can see a little bit of wheel spin, a little bit of traction control issues on corner exit, and Ortiz is now struggling to get the throttle down, to get the power out of his Toyota Supra.
Yeah, and Ortiz, I think right there, with that little mistake, it kind of pushes you in sort of a very interesting and compromising spot to where you make a mistake, you get frustrated, you say, okay, I don't want to make this mistake again, and then you start making more mistakes. And that can happen in road course racing when a driver messes up a corner or they mess up a pass and they lose out on what could have been either a great move for a spot or something else. And then if they mess that up, and then they're like, okay, I need to regain, I need to be more aggressive, and then they try something else, and then they mess up even more, and then they lose more time. And I feel like Ortiz kind of felt like he had that position gain on Carruth, unfortunately couldn't make the pass, and then just trying to get back into the fight on Carruth, ended up losing a lot on braking entry as Alan Day got really close there to a lap car that was around on the racetrack. So Alan Day is going to be able to clear. Very scary out of the final corners of the 89 car right there. But luckily the 21 is able to go by. He's still leading this race, coming to 5 to go.
That was Alberto Parabianco that you saw around in the corners. We remind you that today's coverage of the eNASCAR International iRacing Series is brought to you by Digital Motorsports. And you can learn more about their business by visiting their website at www.digital-motorsports.com today. Alonde clear of the field by almost 12 seconds. James Pike and Kenneth Pointer into the action from the place seat 30, race number 3 of 5 of the 2022 D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports. Here's Paul Jouffreau currently riding in the 3rd spot and a second back of Simon Pilot for the runner-up position. All 3 of these drivers we are on track to hear from in the post-race show, but they've got to finish their jobs first and complete the next 5 laps to lock down these podium positions and keep the points leader-elect, as it were, with the Varadas at bay, especially since Raja Carruth has not been able to gain since his incident a little bit earlier with Vladimir Ziotzis. He is still in 9th and is just hanging on to this position over Diego Ortiz, who might have more worn tires, but also has a faster race car.
Definitely so. We'll try and monitor that battle as it continues through. Here's the battle. Actually, no, here comes back. Ortiz has finally found the space. Carruth is going to slam over the curves. Here comes Ortiz. Contact between the two, and Ortiz will almost go off track. That's the second time, James Pike, that they were in a battle for position going into a heavy braking zone. Ortiz is just trying the best he can to get by, but with the narrowness that this track has, it is so hard to avoid contact at every step of the way. That could have been big disaster for both of them, and Ortiz still hounding on the rear bumper. Carruth just trying to play maximum Hall of Fame defense with 4 laps to go, but Ortiz is just trying, and he has not let go. Here it comes again to the back bumper.
This is not over. Ortiz gave Carruth a shot into the Gladys chicane, and Carruth slammed the door in his face. Now here comes Ortiz back to the inside as they run down the straightaway and work their way towards the Jackie X-Boat. Is there more contact to be had? Yes, there is, as Ortiz is done with Raja Carruth and spins him out. And now Carruth will sit in 10th, and he'll need to get going because there are points implications in play here. But Ortiz had finally reached his boiling point and his limit and had enough of Carruth holding him up and said, you know what, I'm just going to make this move happen myself. We're going to look at the replay here and show you how Ortiz completed the pass on Carruth to go to 9th.
And just look at the way Ortiz is catching up here to Carruth. He knows that he's got fresher tires. He knows that he can get by Carruth. The only problem is with the narrowness that this track has at Zolder, it's just so hard to find space. And so Ortiz was trying to make it up in many of these chicanes you see right about here. And on this right-hander, not the chicane, we'll get to the final corners in just a bit where they made contact, but again, huge run out of that right-hander, back into the kink. This is the one that he has, right there to make the pass, goes to the outside, knows he can try and out-maximize, he knows Carruth is going to play defense, and then right here, tries to make the switch, make the crossover, no space, contact between the two. Ortiz gets into the rear end of Carruth, and we know the story of Carruth at that point just went around, and he's now trying to recoup what he can. He is still in 10th, still a very good gap to Train Lapsevich in the 20 machine back in P11. But Carruth going to lose out on that. Ortiz is going to clear, and now he's going to try and chase on the 14 before this race is over.
Justin Prince, you've got more in the Carruth camp from that incident. What have you heard?
Well, for Roger Carruth, he has been visually not happy, to say the very least. If you look towards his facial expressions right now, the main reaction, outside of silence for a good 10 seconds, he didn't want to pass me, then a bit of a mumble from that point forward. He seems more so focused now on just completing this on forward. Only lost one position in that situation, James. But Roger Carruth made it clear, it looked like, based on how he was driving there, he did not want to let the car go.
Wanted the track position, although the interesting thing is that even with the contact, Ortiz and Carruth really have essentially just swapped spots, or maybe not, because it seems like Roger Carruth has pulled off the racetrack, and now we'll have a big points gap to Victor Barradas as you see this battle for P number 2 there. It was so close for Paul Juffreau. I couldn't tell who that was that he almost got into, but Juffreau nearly making contact. I believe that was over, and the Tellerman blocked over in turn 8.
And that was Alberto Panebianco. We've seen him have some troubles. He goes off again on the gravel strips. There he is as Barrales officially goes by. But Panebianco has had not a great day, to say the least, on his 89 Camaro. Right there on the braking entry, wheel hops the car, slams over the curb, but it's going to be right about here. He gets by Vladimir Sotis, but this becomes an incident that happens right in front of the battle for second and third. You see the 89 goes into the chicane, seems to be fine, but it's around when the leaders start to go by him, and it was just a huge danger zone for Juffreau and Pilot. Luckily, though, for both of them, they're going to be able to get by without any significant damage. Here's Panebianco. There, right there in the far shot, is those drivers in second and third, and as he comes back to the track, it does not get any closer than that. Right there, James Pike. That was insane.
I am genuinely amazed that Paul Juffreau did not slam into Panebianco, and it was just a glancing contact that he had with Panebianco's machine. That probably should have been worse than what it was given the situation, but I don't think Paul Juffreau is going to complain about still being in P31, but certainly is going to be irked at the fact that the lap traffic got into him and broke up the battle between him and Simon Pilot just a hair. But this is still good fighting for the runner-up spot, as Alonde will work his way towards the white flag in this place heat 30.
This is not over whatsoever between Pilot and Juffreau. And think about where Pilot and Juffreau were the first 2 rounds. Pilot crashed at Homestead of Miami. Juffreau did not have a good day. You think about Mosport, kind of did a little bit better. Pilot finished 7th, Juffreau finished in 9th, just within the top 10. Today, though, is the exact moment where they're starting to put it on. They're starting to show up. And if they can capture 2nd and 3rd, or if this battle ends up going to Juffreau or Pilot, either way, this is still going to be a very big improvement. Just short of the race win, but better than all the races before. As Day catches the white flag, all he needs is just one more perfect lap. He's got more than 20 seconds above Simon Pilot in P2, so Day should be clear for the win.
Good look at Alonde. Fun little note to touch on. Alex Tagliani tried to one-stop this race and ran out of fuel coming to the white flag, so he's now down on pit road for service, but you needed to make a pit stop, which is exactly what Alonde has done, and it was one clean lap and a 20-second buffer to his credit away from winning the place heat 30, going for 2 wins in a row in this D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series, and climbing his way up the point standings as well.
So great for this point in time, and Alonde, what a drive it's been. I mean, we didn't see him much at Homestead of Miami Speedway, but Canadian Tire just proved all us different on how good he is at the road courses, how good he is on the sim, and he only needs a handful more corners before he can become a 2-time winner in this eNASCAR International iRacing Series season, and he'll be pretty much the only repeat driver to go to victory lane in the series total.
clear racetrack for the most part all around the Israeli driver Alon Day, who's picked up victories in the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series here at Circuit Zolder in real life. Today, he adds an iRacing victory and a sim racing victory to his credit. The place seats 30 and the second race in a row in the 2022 D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series 2 Alon Day. And here's that battle for second and third and fourth with Morales, who tried to get into the rear of Paul Jouffreau and just quite couldn't get it done as I think everybody wheel spin off of the final corner there. But it is Pilot second, Jouffreau third, and Morales Jr. finishing fourth. It won't be a podium for him, but it will be the points lead because we can confirm that Raja Karut pulled off the racetrack after his incident with Diego Ortiz. Lots of action to recap in the post-race show, but we'll take a quick commercial break and we'll be back with more coverage of the Place Seat 30, third race of 5 of the 2022 D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports on the virtual Circuit Zolder. More coverage coming up just after this.
When I hit the wall, this thing shook like crazy. I have experienced that in real life, so I can compare.
I tend to choose rally games that really put in the actuators through their paces, and they've been holding up really well.
That's exactly how it is in real life. That's the coolest part.
This is for the win.
Still more abreast into the braking zone. This is sensational racing. And getting ready to cross. He goes around the outside, but it's not enough. And hunting for a way by it all. Gonna come back at him. It's gonna be a race to the line. Does he have enough?
That's probably the first time that I've forgotten that I was on a simulator. And that was amazing.
It's so cool and so realistic and gives you the ultimate feel and the most realistic feel.
I love the bumps. They really made me feel like, really realistic.
This is engaging all of your senses.
Welcome back to coverage of the D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports. You see Alon Day burning it down after his victory. We remind you that if you log on to d-box.com/eNASCAR/contacts, you could predict who will win this eNASCAR International iRacing Series for 2022. And if you get it right, you could win a Digital Motorsports rig with D-Box technology, a full SimLabs chassis, a racing seat, brackets, a full Fanatec direct drive base, NASCAR wheel and pedal set with a shifter, a floor stand mount, a 49-inch Samsung curve string, and a D-Box haptic system courtesy of our friends at D-Box. Invite you to feel it all. Here is a look at your full rundown and your final results from the Play Seat 30 third race of 5 in the D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports from Circuit Zolder. Alon Day, your winner for the second week in a row ahead of the home driver Simon Pilot. Paul Jouffreau finished in the third position. We'll talk to all three of those drivers in just a few moments. Victor Barradas Jr. in fourth. It wasn't a podium finish this time. It's actually the first time he's finished off the podium in this series, but he will take over the points lead, as you'll see in just a few moments. Jake Cosio with a great drive, his best drive of this series to finish fifth. Ulysses Del Sol with a solid run as well, comes home in sixth. Frederic Gabillon runs in seventh. Alex Alba finishes eighth. Jaden Reyna and Trayton Lapsevich come home in ninth and 10th. Kenneth White.
Gordon Barnes in the 148 had a stealthy afternoon here today from Zolder. He finishes P11. Justin Campbell, the 81, follows suit behind him in P12. Diogo Ortiz in the number 6 car will be back in 13th. He'll be the first driver one lap down on track, followed by Massimiliano Lanza in the number 88 car. Miguel Gomez, after a handful of spins, started 15th today, ends up 15th at the end of this 30-lapper. Tobias Downhauer, despite a very solid run up at the front of the field, had to make an unscheduled pit stop for a second time today. He finished one lap down in P16 for the pole sitter. Giorgio Maggi in the 69 will end up P17. It'll be 18th in the debut run for Abraham Calderon in the number 2 car. Alex Tagliani, despite starting from pit road today, he ends up P19. Vladimiros Zotzis in the number 1 car, he'll end up P20. And you'll round out the final drivers within this top 20 here from Zolder. Final drivers within this group include Yevgen Sokolovsky, Jocelyn Fecteau. Davide Delara had a bit of troubles today in 23rd. Raja Karuth had a solid run all day long, but contact with Diego Ortiz forced him. He ended up out of this race before it was over, 4 laps down. Alberto Panebianco, tough road for him. He ends up P25. Andres Perez de Rara and Aaron Cosio round out the 27-car field.
We cannot underscore how big that is for Raja Karuth, who entered this race as the points leader and now I think could potentially drop maybe all the way to 7th or 8th in the standings with the lack of points. It could be a big slide for Karuth, and this could now be between Barradas or Lapsevich or Downhauer or De Alba. There's so many other drivers that could be part of the points fight when we get to the road course at Daytona next week. But for now, let's turn our attention to our race winner out of Ashdod, Israel. Alon Day joins us once again. And Alon, it's 7 victories that you have in the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series here in your career in real life at Zolder. Now you add an iRacing victory at this track in competition. What is it about this circuit that you just seem to take to so easily, and what just sort of clicks with you here?
I don't know. I have something special with this track. From my first ever NASCAR race, I already won in the real life, obviously. And I like it. I used to live nearby this track. In 2020, I drove for a Belgian team that's based 5 minutes from this track. So I have something special with Zolder. I won in the NASCAR this year, and I won the 24 hours race in Zolder. So I don't know. I guess I have something special with this track. I like technical tracks, low speed that really require a lot of driving skills and abilities, and especially with those cars, they're way too fast for that track. You have to really dance with the car, and you need to know what you're doing.
Given that you have so much experience here, how does your experience on iRacing with the circuit compare to what you've raced in real life and all the laps you put down in real life here?
I guess everything is almost the same. You know, the car is Xfinity compared to the wheel and the NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series cars. So obviously there are some difference with the car, but the track, the lines, the braking points, everything is almost the same. It was pretty cool also this race that we had to change tires and refuel, put some fun side for this race, and I'm happy to put the finest car in victory lane again. Hopefully, I will do the same in Daytona Road.
And that's where we want to head next. Daytona next week, like you said, and it's a very different road course yet again from what we've experienced at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park and here today at Circuit Zolder. So, any expectations for round number 4 of this D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports?
To be honest, I was surprised with Simon and Tobias. I think they did a great job, especially in qualifying. I wasn't ready for such a high, quick pace in qualifying, and I think this is something I need to work on for the next race. And yeah, I don't know what happened with Tobias, which is I think a big contender for the championship. I just suddenly saw him as backmarker. And I think this is the most important thing also for Daytona. You just need to stay out of trouble because the championship is so short, only 5 races. You don't have the time to recover from an accident or something like that. And I already had one in Homestead, so I really need to put some practice on.
It is the finest Chevrolet Camaro. That is the finest car here at Circuit Zolder this afternoon. Along, congratulations on your victory.
And the finest driver.
Yeah. I can't get the finest driver. That's a very fair and valid point. Far more fine than any of us on the broadcast side would be. But Along, thanks for the time. Congratulations on your victory in the Place Seat 30. We look forward to seeing you at Daytona 1 week from today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you in a week.
Delonde, your race winner yet again in the eNASCAR International iRacing Series. From P1, we head to the Belgian driver, Simon Pilot, who comes away with a runner-up finish at his home track. He is with our Kenneth Bueno.
And an exciting day for the Belgian driver, the hometown hero here from Circuit Zolder. Simon Pilot comes home in P2 today at this track. Simon, I can imagine going into this race with real-life experience here and the fact that this is your home track. You're pretty much the only home driver in the entire series coming to today. So must have felt exciting. It must have felt great to run in P2 today at the end of it all.
Yeah, this race was really difficult. I was quite surprised with my pace in the beginning because I didn't have time to train this week. But I knew I was fast on this track, so I had hoped to be in the top 3. And then I did a good qualifying, but I think where I struggled was with the tires. And so I decided to pit a bit earlier than everyone to get some places that I had lost in the start of the race, and it worked out.
Of course, ended up working out for you. And as a NASCAR Wheel and Euro Series driver, you do have experience at Circuit Zolder. Of course, you guys race here mostly in the fall. You guys are coming back to this track in 2022. What seems to be the biggest part or biggest dynamic about Circuit Zolder that makes it so fun and makes it so technical, especially today on the sim with these Xfinity Series cars?
I think Zolder is probably the most technical track of your NASCAR championship. Especially the chicanes. If the chicanes, you can lose a lot of time, and it basically is the key to the rhythm. And if you manage to pass them well every lap, you already have like 50% of the track in your pocket. So I think that's where the biggest difference is.
Well, definitely, you have a lot of experience here. Definitely showed in the entirety of this 30-lapper here from Circuit Zolder. Now moving forward, 2 tracks in the United States that face you up next, Daytona Road Course and the Phoenix Raceway, the final 2 races. What is going to be the approach there? What's going to be the mindset going into those 2 American tracks to make sure that you can take a jump up, a leap into the point standings, and maybe even get a win like you did last season?
I really like Daytona, so I think it's a track where I have my chances for the win. Of course, I definitely don't expect it to be easy with Alan, Tobias, and all the other competitors. We are almost all very fast, especially at Daytona. I remember last year it was a real struggle. Phoenix, I don't really much have experience on it, honestly, but I'll do my best to get the most point possible to get the best places at the championship and maybe a win. Who knows? It can happen in this championship as the car are really difficult, so everything can still happen.
Well, definitely the momentum on your side for sure on this P2 effort. I think I can still hear the Belgian sim fans in the racetrack still cheering you on. But nonetheless, Simon, I want to congratulate you on behalf of the broadcast team on this second place effort from Circuit Zolder, and of course wishing you the best of luck as you move forward to the final races in this eNASCAR International iRacing Series.
Thank you, and congratulations to Alan and Paul, who were really really fair in this race, and it's always really fun to race with them. Thank you all.
Simon pilot James Pike ends up as the second place finisher here in this Place Seat 30. I believe you've got the third place driver. A very solid run for the 64 Paul Jouffreau.
Indeed, Paul Jouffreau comes home in the third position this afternoon in the Place Seat 30. He now joins us on the broadcast. And Paul, I actually want to start by going back to last week, where you raced at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and there were issues with tire degradation. You and Simon both came down early and didn't quite get the track position back that you needed. So with the experience of that race in mind, how much did that shape your strategy for today, and how much did that influence the way you approach this race?
Yeah, for me at the start, yeah. For me, there was not a way to not stop at Canadian Tire because of can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So on Canadian Tire, for me it was no way to not stop because all the races of past year, we always stop, but it was because of the fuel, and I didn't even look at the fuel for this race. And if we pitted at this race, it was because the tank didn't have the fuel for the whole race. So that's why we pit, and with Simon, we discussed before the Canadian Tire race, and we say that we had to pit, but it was not the good choice.
And so you turn around and you have an incredible battle with Simon. Just take us through what that was like throughout the duration of this race. We saw a lot of the action between you two, and especially after Simon's account of it, it sounded like that you two had a lot of fun racing each other.
Yeah, this races was just at the mental, because to be fast at one lap is easy, but all the races, my mindset was not to be fast, but it was not to slip the rear tires. So that's why at the beginning of each split, I was a bit slower than everyone, and at the end, I was a bit faster. So yeah, that's Simon was way faster than me at the start of the race, and then when he started to struggle with his rear tire, my tire was not that bad. So yeah, I come back, and yeah, the battle was really good. When I attack him, I was smiling, so it was really good.
You were smiling at that moment, but there was also a moment with Alberto Panabianco where you nearly ended up running into him. What were your emotions like at that point? What were you feeling? What were you thinking at that
I was
moment?
like, no, like that. I do too bad weekend, not this one.
Not that way. So, but you come away with the podium finish, you get lots of great points, and now you turn your attention towards Daytona. What sort of challenges do you expect from Daytona that you might not have at a Canadian Tire or a Circuit Zolder?
I really like this track, I like it, but with the NASCAR, it's just a really difficult track. So I will work a lot, but I think that I could have I will maybe have a really good pace. So yeah, I'm gonna give everything I've got for this race.
Paul, congratulations on your third place finish today in the Place Seat 30 here at iRacing's virtual Circuit Zolder. Thanks so much for the time, and I suppose bon chance in Daytona next week.
Thank you.
Paul Jouffreau, P3 this afternoon. That completes our podium interviews for the Place Seat 30 race number 3 of 5 in the 2022 D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports, and we head to the World Center of Racing next Saturday afternoon, 12 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States, 5 p.m. GMT if you're watching over in Europe. It's the road course at Daytona. It's a busy week for that particular road course, both in real life and in the sim. Certain events might be happening there in person, but so much that we have to look out for, and a quite frankly a different cast of drivers at the top of the point standings. We're going to see more shuffling here between these 2 weeks than I think we're going to see throughout the entirety of the series, and that may be the storyline to watch going into Daytona, is who has risen from this wacky race at Zolder to the top of the standings and who is in for the fight for the championship of the series.
And you know, James, in longer series and in longer stints in a campaign, you always see this. You always see some drivers struggle in the beginning, kind of learn it, kind of warm up a little bit, kind of get their stretches in, and as soon as they're warmed up, as soon as they're ready to go, they start to pounce. They start to go all the way to the front. They start to win races. They start to perform well. And I feel like that's what we're seeing here. Of course, it's only 5 races, so there's not much time to kind of see it all unfold. But in the case of many drivers, including Alain Day, it is not the time to sleep on them anymore. You cannot start to kind of check them off and say they're not going to be here. They're not going to be winning you this race. They're going to be there, no doubt. And so Daytona Road Course is going to be so much fun. I mean, a classic American icon track, a brand new edition of the last corner chicane in the NASCAR side of things that's going to add a little bit more fun to it in the final segment of the racetrack. But it is going to be so much fun, such a great circuit, and such a great place to put the Xfinity Series cars on.
So much to look forward to. So many things that are going to change in between now and then. But we have to wait a week in order to find out. We say goodbye from Circuit Zolder in Belgium and the Place Seat 30. So many people to thank from the staff across iRacing and Podium Esports to make things happen. Drew Adamson, Sean Ambrose, Tyler Hudson, Cisco Scalmuza, Travis Sullenberger, and Corey Vervinch on the iRacing side. On our side, Gary Sexton, John Theodore, and then our broadcast team for the afternoon. Our cameraability, Duggar Beard, social media, Cameron Alberdon, pit reporter, Justin Prince, producer, Ryan Bauer, and my colleague in the booth, Kenneth Bueno. I am James Punt. Thanking you so much for watching our coverage of the Place Seat 30 round 3 of 5 in the D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series presented by Digital Motorsports. We will see you next Saturday from Daytona.
Just this morning, a side of me open that I never noticed. We are the future, ride for the culture. Put my dirty clothes on the lines of a notebook. Never hide from exposure, show you nobody is unbroken.